Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy Luke back for another NFL Showdown live stream. This time for Thursday Night Football between the Colts and the Jets, which might not be the best matchup in terms of exciting teams, but they at least still got some big Draftkings contests to try and take down, and of course, some money to try and make. So we're going to hop right into the player poll here so that we can get through it as concisely as possible. These are going to be my Patreon projections as always here. So if you're looking for direct access to this, obviously if there's anything that changes after this video, any last second injuries, I will be updating everything on here as I do throughout the week. So make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. But anyways, starting at the top, I want to start off with some of our value options for this slate. So we're going to do it in a little bit of a different order. Then we're going to talk our studs, and we're actually going to make a few lineups at the end to give you guys an idea of the type of lineup composition I'm looking at. But first off, let's talk about the injuries that we updated here in the last 30 minutes. Tevin Coleman has been marked as out. We expected that. Had gone back into some practice, but they don't necessarily need him. They have two guys ahead of him on the depth chart, so not surprised that they are not going to be rushing him back. Also have Corey Davis is out, so he was doubtful throughout the week, was doubtful for last week. If you guys saw my video from earlier on the week with the preview, I expected Corey Davis to be out. A lot of the people in the industry might not have been as in tune with that. So all of my projections really didn't sway very much. People like Keelan Cole, I was already on. People like Denzel Mims, I was already considering for value. So let's talk about it a little bit, right? So during our video earlier on the week, we already talked about Keelan Cole, somebody who's gotten more and more usage for this team throughout the year. Was injured at the beginning of the year as well, but again, is getting more acclimated into this offense. And something I think that's a little bit underrated, especially tonight, is his familiarity with White, somebody who's been playing on the second team for a majority of his practices this year, getting work with White. So somebody who has a rapport already built. People like Corey Davis, if he were to be playing, do not have that rapport yet. They've been playing for a week and a half now, that kind of thing. Keelan Cole has been running reps with White since the beginning of the year. So I like going there. It's only $2,400. You can see I have $2,499. That's just a little bit of a typo from my end there. $2,400. You can see he projects for 4.2x value. That's really good at that spot. And anytime I'm targeting value, especially on a single game slate, I'm trying to make sure that they're in this like 2 to 4K range. Some of these guys, $1,000 or below, unless they're a complete misprice from DraftKings, usually lack that top end upside. And anytime you start getting into this, $5,000, $6,000 range, you're really looking for somebody to get you 15 to 20 fantasy points to pay off, rather than somebody like Keelan Cole. If he goes out there and he gets you just 13 points, even just 12 points, that kind of thing, that would be more than enough to be in the optimal lineup. So he doesn't have to do much to pay off. I think he's in a very good spot to get at least 7 or 8 targets tonight. If he cashes in those for about 4 or 5 catches, again, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Someone else you consider as well, a little bit more of a home run play kind of threat, would be Denzel Mims at $2,000. A little bit cheaper, also going to be a little bit less popular. You can see I have him at just half the ownership of somebody like Keelan Cole, a little bit more than half, but also has that deep play upside. Mims, a little bit more of a speedster, somebody that's going to be playing on the outside, as opposed to Keelan Cole, that's more of a possession wide receiver. So if you're in cash, I would definitely be going with a Keelan Cole senior. I don't think it's really a question there, but in GPP formats, Denzel Mims is a little bit interesting. Somebody else I'd consider as value. He's a little bit more expensive. Again, I usually like to go to for value, but Ty Johnson at $6,400 with Tevin Coleman out of the mix. We don't have to worry about that extra body there. Ty Johnson going to get his usual workload. He's been used as a third down back. He's been used as a change of base back behind Michael Carter. I think after last week's performance, and it's not like I don't like Michael Carter here, I really do. I think almost everybody's going to flood to Carter, though. You can see that's reflected with my ownership. I have him at 21.5% right now. But wouldn't be surprised if he came in ahead of that. As of right now, it's where I have him, but people tend to flood and try to chase some of those recent performances. So could end up being a little bit low on that there. So again, Ty Johnson, because he has that receiving upside, because he's somebody they'll use as a change of pace type of back, could very well vulture a touchdown or just get you 3 or 4 catches and pay it off that way. Anyone else for value, I'd say? We can look at tight end, right? So people like Ryan Griffin, he's only $1,400. He brings a lot more receiving upside to the table than somebody like Tyler Kroft, is more athletic. And in the snap shares that we've seen, has had almost twice the production of Kroft. So while he is the backup, he's not going to be seeing quite as many snaps. At $1,400, if he goes out there and scores you a touchdown, only has 2 catches, that kind of thing, that's more than enough to pay off. So I don't hate the play right there either in terms of value. But that's really it I'd look to. I mean, on the Colts side of things, there's not much value to speak of. The only really options you could look at is maybe like a Jack Doyle, right? He's $4,600, also a backup tight end. The issue is that he's a lot more expensive than the other backup tight end. You know, Ryan Griffin just $1,400. You're dealing with a guy that's priced more than 3 times as much. So there's levels to this. The pricing is a little bit frustrating this week. It's not going to be easy to make a very good lineup. As a result, we're definitely going to see a winning score. It's a little bit lower than we've seen in the past. Not only with the pricing, but also with the game script we have here, a relatively low total game. So overall, it's not going to be a sexy slate here, but making sure we're targeting the guys that are going to get a lot of touches is going to be important. With that being said, some of the guys I'll be targeting, first and foremost, number one is going to be Jonathan Taylor. Because we're going to have this low scoring game, because we're going to have to try and make sure we get all of these stud options right. I think Jonathan Taylor is somebody I'm locking. I'm either going to have him in every flex spot or at captain. I think he's just unavoidable on the slate. I'm projected for 22 touches right now, over 20 fantasy points. The only one even sniffing that type of a projection. So I love using him even with Carson Wentz. I think you could very easily use both of them together, especially in this type of a game script in a low scoring game. Someone else I'm trying to jam into lineups is Jameson Crowder, especially now that we know that Corey Davis is out. If you guys saw my video earlier this week, essentially Jameson Crowder is the only one who's fairly priced on this entire slate, maybe except for Jonathan Taylor, but he's obviously a little bit expensive there at nearly $12,000. Crowder should be $7,800 regardless of injury on this team. But now that Corey Davis is out, it's going to see an extra 2.5 targets per game on average. That's going to equate to an additional 2.2 fantasy points per game, which took him from a 16.4 fantasy point projection to closer to probably an 18.5 point projection now, which at $7,800, that is nearly 2.6x value, up from the 2.1x we had him at just a little bit earlier on today. So like him even more than what my projections have here. This is a little bit of old data right here. Also, you could end up using him at the captain slot, right? So if anybody's going to go out there for the Jets team today, get you 2 touchdowns, it is going to be Crowder. He's somebody who's going to have the highest target share of anybody on this team. Shouldn't even really be close. I mean, you're going to probably see about 7 or 8 targets for Elijah Moore, probably 5 or 6 for Berrios. And like I said, Keelan Cole, probably going to be that number 4 wide receiver. May actually be the number 3 ahead of Braxton Berrios. That's the way I have it at the very least. You can see the Draftkings pricing has it as the opposite of that, but I definitely think Keelan Cole is going to get a few more touches than Braxton Berrios. And again, the guy who might get a deep play threat or two would be Denzel Mims as a pure flyer. Let's see. Anyone else we would definitely want to jam in? So obviously we talked about Jonathan Taylor. We talked about Jameson Crowder there. Michael Pittman would be the next target there. He's a little bit more expensive than I'd like. But like I mentioned before, everyone is expensive on this slate. So making sure we can fit in the guys that just have the highest raw point total is going to be ever more so important. So last week he had 15 targets. He had 11 catches, 2 touchdowns. Both of those touchdowns were from the 1-yard line. So don't want to look into that too much. It's not like he's a touchdown machine out of anywhere, but definitely getting a lot of the targets that we're looking for. Anytime somebody's getting targeted in the double-digit range, you're going to want to have them fantasy, particularly for a single game slate. So I don't think we have to overthink this here. I'd much rather have Pittman Jr. and Jonathan Taylor than Carson Wentz. So this is an important talking point here. I think just because you have those 2 studs on the Colts doesn't mean you have to have Carson Wentz. He's $10,800. I'd much rather have Mike White. He's only $9,800. And even if they end up getting spanked tonight, which I think the Jets are going to get spanked tonight, he's going to at least put up some garbage time production. So Carson Wentz, you can see he's in my player pool. I'm going to have less than the field. I just think the price tag is a little bit too high. And I would much rather prioritize people like Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. To try and fit all 3 of them into the same lineup is nearly impossible, especially when people like Crowder are absolute priorities, potentially even people like Michael Carter and Ty Johnson. So Carson Wentz is kind of like the man left out. So giving you an idea of that. And let's scroll down here, see if there's anyone else to talk about. I mean, Mo Alley Cox, talked about him as a value play during my video. I don't hate going there. He's just an average play to me. He's garnering about as much ownership as I think he should at about 25% in a quarter of lineups. I'm going to have him at about 35% of my lineups. So just enough to get a little bit more leverage than I need on the field, at least to pay that rake right there. But not anybody who's going to make or break my night. What I want to do now is I'm going to bring up DraftKings. We're going to go ahead, go through a couple of the different lineup builds that I'm considering for tonight, and then wrap it up after that. So let me go ahead and bring up the screen here. All right, share. And again, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them down in the chat. After we build a lineup or two, I'll get to any of the questions if there's any down there, and we'll move on from there. So cool. We have DraftKings up here. Let's go ahead and make a dummy lineup here. First and foremost, at captain, we're going to try and fit in Jonathan Taylor. So it's my favorite play on the slate. Let's look at what a lineup with him at captain is going to look like, because obviously he's expensive, going to be a little bit prohibitive. So we know that we're going to have to take some value plays for this. So let's go ahead and knock those out right off the bat. Obviously, my number one value play on the slate, Keelan Cole Sr., going to go ahead and knock them in there. Don't hate going to another guy on this Jets team for value. Again, even if they're going to be playing from behind, they're at the very least going to be seeing some touches. So somebody I definitely like considering, we can go to $7,800 Crowder. He's going to be a little bit higher than our average remaining per player, but doesn't really change their build too much by taking him. Probably still need a cheaper option for this Jets team. Ty Johnson's probably a little bit too expensive. You know, we're going to try and jam in somebody like a Michael Pittman Jr., potentially a Mike White if we can. So I'm going to try and keep this one a little bit cheaper. I think going at tight end is a good strategy here. Go to Ryan Griffin. Obviously, he's not going to be starting tonight. He's not a high volume player by any means. But could go out there, get you a touchdown. He's going to let us spend up for who we want here, which first and foremost is going to be Michael Pittman Jr. And then if we really wanted to, we could take Carson Wentz, but I'd honestly rather go with Mike White. So now we have a little bit of extra cash. Let's see if we can take somebody rather than Ryan Griffin, because obviously he's a little bit less of a sexy play. We could spend up for Denzel Mims. I wasn't sure whether we were going to have the salary to do that. So I'm actually glad to see that there. And you can see this is a little bit of an interesting build to me, right? So obviously we have Mike White. We have a bunch of his wide receivers as value, and we're able to run it back with both of those options for the Colts. While this is definitely a lineup I would play in GPPs, it's probably not something I'd use for cash. In cash, I definitely want to have more Indianapolis players. So I don't hate that lineup right there, at least for a GPP format. What we'll do now is we'll go ahead and make more of a cash build, something I think is a little bit safer for tonight. So if we're running a cash build, I think first and foremost, using Jonathan Taylor at captain is a no-brainer move. I mean, this guy has the highest floor of anyone on the slate, has the highest ceiling of anyone on the slate as well. So we don't want to overthink that at all. And again, if we're using more of a cash build, I think we need to try and jam in the plays that we know are going to be good here. So first and foremost, we know Carson Wentz is going to go out there, probably get you 16 fantasy points at the very least. In cash, that's enough to get by. That's more than enough to get by. Same thing with Michael Pittman Jr. We know he's likely to go out there, probably get you at least 13, 14 fantasy points at the very least. So you try to fit in these three options if you can into the same lineup. Then you try to build from there as optimally as you can. So in terms of value plays, the one that definitely makes the most sense is definitely going to be Keelan Cole Sr. His highest floor of all these guys in terms of point per dollar, pretty much gets you to where you need to be. And now we have $4,600 remaining per position. So this is where we're going to make our money in terms of a cash lineup. This is where we're going to be able to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the field. So for me, maybe you could try to take this as a little bit more of a balanced approach. I don't hate going to Mo Alley-Cox here. Right? If we go to Mo Alley-Cox, this is somebody who is going to be starting for this team. He's going to get some red zone production. He's highly correlated with somebody like a Carson Wentz. Now we have $4,000 left for the rest. And see, we may have a little bit overspent with Mo Alley-Cox. It's kind of what we realized with this here. If we were to go down to a Jack Doyle, let's see what that opens up. So Jack Doyle is still going to see some targets. Doesn't have quite the ceiling of a Mo Alley-Cox, but the floors are relatively similar, right? You're looking at probably around a 6-point floor for somebody like Mo Alley-Cox, probably like a 4.5-point floor for Jack Doyle. And in times when you're looking at cash lineups, sometimes that's the main metric you're looking at. And if we pay for Jack Doyle, right, we spend down that extra, $600, we're able to get somebody like Michael Badgley in here. And anytime you're able to play a kicker in cash, I love it, because kickers are going to be extremely low volatile plays. You're looking at a relatively limited range of outcomes. They're not going to go out there and get you 25 fantasy points. It's also very unlikely they're going to go out there and get you less than 3 fantasy points, that kind of thing. So he's a safe option there. I mean, I'd much rather have somebody like a Mo Alley-Cox there. But overall, I do think this is probably getting as close as we can to an optimal lineup right here. I obviously I'm not running them on my Sims right here right now. I'm going to be doing that after we get off the video right here, but I'm assuming this is what it's going to spit out. I mean, again, highest projected player at captain. I'm taking a lot of these guys with just high floors and the best value plays on the slate. So yeah, that's all we got for this live stream. I'm going to keep it a little bit short here. We're playing NBA tonight. Obviously, we have a Showdown live stream for golf a little bit later on. UFC video coming out. So we have a lot of shit to get done. So let's get to it. Good luck with your lineups tonight. If you guys are watching this on replay and you have any questions, you can go ahead and put the questions down in the chat and I'll get to them when I see them. So again, I appreciate all the support here.